Hello and welcome to this Future Net Zero interview. Today I'm with Rebekah Braswell from the Land Life Company, which aims to plant enough trees to restore 2 billion hectares of degraded land and help businesses deliver net zero. So hi Rebekah, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me.
And could you introduce yourself and the company and the aim that I just mentioned a little bit for our audience that might not know what you do?
Sure, absolutely. I am the Chief Commercial Officer of Land Life Company and one of its founding members. And our goal as a company is to restore the world's 2 billion hectares of degraded land. For context, that is the size of US and China put together. It's a humongous task, and we aim to do it through tree planting ourselves, but also enabling other companies through the use of our technology to help support this mission.
And how can, it's a very obvious question, but what is tree planting and how can large scale tree planting help people achieve carbon neutrality?
Absolutely. So tree planting is the very simple act of cultivating a seedling. So it goes from seed to seedling. That's usually done in a nursery context. You then take the seedling out of the nursery and into the field. How you do that, when you do that is super important. You dig a hole of varying heights depending on the seedling that you're working with. You plant the seedling in the center and you pack the dirt around it. It's very simple. Volunteers around the world do it. Professional planting crews around the world do it. It's a very time-honored tradition in a lot of cultures as well.
So how does it work then? A company, one of your clients will pay you because they want to, they have a net zero target and they want to reach that. So they would pay you to help them offset their emissions by planting the trees?
Yes. So one of the most beautiful aspects of a tree is its ability to draw CO2 down from the atmosphere. So there's literally no greater tool than a tree to take CO2 out of the atmosphere. It also has all of these other benefits, of course. It cleans the air, it cleans water, it increases groundwater infiltration, it provides habitat, it nurtures biodiversity. All of these other impacts are also generated from tree planting. But companies primarily come to us for that CO2 capability. And that means that they have been unable or not able yet to inset their emissions to become carbon neutral themselves. And so they seek to compensate for their residual emissions through tree planting. And the reason they choose tree planting is for that drawdown effect, that they're actually contributing to removal, carbon dioxide removal, and for generating all of these other environmental impacts, but also social impacts and job creation and social benefits as well.
And where do you plant the trees? Is it around the whole world? And or does it have to be in the area that the company itself is operating? How does that side of it work?
Yeah, so we when we first started the company, we planted anywhere that someone would let us plant a tree. We were doing tons of experiments and trials and really trying to learn and refine that tree planting process, which I described as super simple, but there are lots of factors that you need to take into account to make it successful. And what we've done now, as we've grown as a company, is focused on building operational hubs. So we are planting in about 3 to 4 areas in the world right now where we will plant every year after year so that we can actually achieve scale. And that has 2 effects. One is it optimizes the supply chain. It gives nurseries predictability that we're going to be there year after year. And it allows us to learn from each planting season so that we can improve what we do the next year. And then the ultimate aim of building these hubs is that you're starting to achieve impact on a landscape scale. So this is not just a disparate tree effort planting here, a one-off. This is about fundamentally regenerating our ecosystems through tree planting as a kickstart to that process.
And you used lots of different, someone could think of tree planting and think of someone with a shovel digging a hole and putting the seed in it. But you use a wide range of technologies, both to actually plant the trees, monitor them, and like you say, create this wider kind of habitat restoration, don't you?
Yeah, so we work, what's key here is we work primarily on degraded land, which the UN has defined as land that will not come back unaided. It means some form of intervention is going to be required. And so we have put a lot of thought into what does that form look like? How do you increase tree survival rates without creating dependencies on ongoing human intervention? For example, irrigation. You can keep trees alive through irrigation, but they don't become resilient trees and you certainly don't want to start irrigating the wilderness. So we have thought about how can technology help us along the value chain of creating those individual leverage points to improve performance, if you will, in the field. And we think about that even from the design phase. So we collect data on all of our tree plantings, what worked well, what didn't, and we use that as input into our planting design. So we can think about, what do we do differently on a north-facing slope versus a south-facing slope? What tree species does better in which climate? How did that tree species or that seedling start? What were the conditions in the nursery? And so we've captured all this data in our proprietary database, and we're starting to develop machine learning algorithms that will help us answer all of those questions when we find a site. So that's in the design phase. What is the optimal planting design for this piece of land and the conditions we've encountered? The second is in the nursery. So how do we cultivate these seedlings so that they're climate resilient? You know, there are all sorts of scenarios about what's going to happen to the climate in the future. And our goal as Land Life is not to pick a scenario, but to make sure that these trees are resilient for all types of different weather conditions that might come its way over the lifetime of that tree, which can be beyond 100 years. Then we move to the field. So as you've mentioned, one of the things we focus on is scale. I mean, the 2 billion hectares, it's large. We're going to need to find smart ways to speed up the tree planting process. So right now we're looking into automated planting. How do we increase the speed and effectiveness and quality of tree planting by automating it with autonomous vehicles that could, for example, plant trees at night? That produces less stress on the trees. You could extend the planting window through automated planting and plant more trees in a given season. And then the third part of the puzzle is really the monitoring. So collecting data on everything that we do. So again, we can learn how to do our job better each time we're in the field. And we do that through our own app that we've created to collect data on individual seedlings. We fly drones over our fields that pick up the data. And eventually, as the trees get bigger, we don't have to be in the fields because we can pick up everything that we need from satellite.
So essentially, all of these technologies help the tree planting. And do you use them as well to make sure that no damage is being done to the ecosystems that you're working in? Because I've heard some complaints leveled against not all tree planting, but certain people planting trees, and it might be done in the wrong way, where it's the wrong species or in the wrong areas or where protected animals live, and it's affecting them.
Yes, no, we are thrilled with the momentum that tree planting has received, I would say, in the past 2 years, and the attention and support that it has generated. But we are very not concerned, but specific, I would say, about how it is done, because it's great to have this momentum and support, but we need to make sure that we are planting the right species and a mix of species in the right places at the right time. So we never plant monocultures. We are a nature restoration company. We don't just plant for CO2. We plant for what the landscape needs, and it has the added benefit of drawing down CO2. But to be very clear, our objective is nature restoration, and CO2 helps us fund that objective. But yeah, the mix of species, when you plant them, how you plant them, it's all critical and involves so many different details, which is why we've really focused on using data to help us navigate that.
And the most important question of all, perhaps, because none of this can be done without money.
Yeah.
How much does it cost for a company to get involved with something like this? And what kind of results have you seen so far in terms of the emissions reductions or offsets that you've seen?
Sure, absolutely. So the price really ranges from the geographies that you're planting in. So if you're planting in Ghana versus planting in Spain, the cost of labor is different. So it really varies, but I would say between $20 and $25 a ton is a safe bet, and that also really depends on the scale and the number of years that you commit to.
Perfect. And what clients have you worked with so far, and what reductions have you seen, if you can tell us a little about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's really interesting, the types of companies that seek to get involved in reforestation and use that as a primary mechanism to not only touch their CO2 goals, but I would say their broader climate agenda. So we work with the tech companies. They're very forward-looking. They're very eager to see how technology can support nature restoration. And that's been a great alignment with our focus on technology in this process as well. We've also found great interest from the energy sector, right? This is a sector that is going under massive transformation. They are not going to be able to change overnight to a zero emissions business. So they're looking at ways to compensate in the process. And we've found some really great partners. Linden Energy is a great one to highlight, that have made a commitment to carbon neutrality and that they will compensate for what they can't reduce in their own emissions profile through tree planting. And there you find such massive scale that you really, it gets us excited. We think, okay, these people can't solve this problem overnight. They're going to need to plant trees to do it. Imagine what we can achieve towards our mission with this level of scale. So the energy sector provides some real scale opportunities for tree planting and nature restoration. And then we've also found, I would say, two more that are interesting is in retail or e-commerce. They find that tree planting is very relatable. Everyone has really positive associations with nature, whether it be their backyard or their first camping trip. It's a great way to engage your customers is through tree planting because it's tangible. You can see it, you can touch it, you have your own reference points in your neighborhood. I think one thing that's so hard about the Paris Accords and 2 degrees and carbon neutrality is you can't picture it, you can't see it. Whereas tree planting gives you something so tangible to latch onto, and it's very relatable for consumers. So we're finding more and more interest from e-commerce. And then lastly, I would say the financial sector is starting to get interested and starting to get involved. And I think where I find that particularly encouraging is it's becoming a real sector. Climate solutions is becoming a sector if finance is interested in what are the products and services that we could invest in related to climate solutions. And they have long-term time horizons, especially pension funds and things like that, that are nicely correlated with the time it takes to restore the planet. So, I mean, I would say the kind of the characteristic across them all is that they're forward-looking, they're looking for innovation, new solutions, but they come from very different backgrounds and seek to use tree planting in very different ways.
Perfect. And my final question, you touched on it slightly there already by saying that, you know, people can't be expected to necessarily decarbonize overnight. But what rebuttal would you offer to people who say that carbon offsetting isn't necessarily the right way at the moment to be driving net zero progress, and we need to cut emissions at their source instead?
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair argument. And I think what we all need to do is become much more sophisticated and detailed in how we define our pathways to emissions reductions. So you might need to be able to prove that you have done everything possible to reduce your emissions in a given year. Here's your pathway for continuing on that road and reducing emissions over time. And then I think we also need to realize that not all offsets are created equal. Right now, any company can claim that they are carbon neutral, whether they're spending 45 cents per ton on carbon or whether they're spending $70 per ton on carbon. And you're given the same stamp and you're given the same sticker in your ESG reports. And I think we all know that the cost of carbon is greater than 45 cents per ton. So I think we need to increase the level of sophistication in the discussion, in the marketplace, in buyers' awareness and education and understanding what they are actually contributing to. And to keep pushing countries, companies, everyone on, show us your pathway to zero emissions. We understand it will take time, we understand it will take investment, but show us a detailed how you are going to do this, not just that you're going to do it, how are you going to do it?
Well, thank you very much, Rebekah, and I look forward to catching up in the future to find out more about how the mission to restore 2 billion hectares is going.
Well, thank you for having me, and thanks for your interest.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.